The attack on St. Martin was a failed attempt by the Dutch Republic to recapture the island and former base of the Dutch West India Company from the Spanish. In 1633 the Spanish had invaded Saint Martin and Anguilla, driving off the French and Dutch inhabitants. The French and Dutch banded together to repel the Spanish, and it was during a 1644 sea battle that the Dutch commander Peter Stuyvesant, later the governor of New Amsterdam, unsuccessfully besieged Fort Amsterdam and was forced to retreat with the loss of hundreds of men. A stray Spanish cannonball shattered his leg, which had to be amputated. But luck was on the Dutch side, and when the 80 Years' War between Spain and the Netherlands ended, the Spanish no longer needed a Caribbean base and just sailed away in 1648. Background: the Spanish, who had been content with the lucrative holdings in the Greater Antilles, began to notice the successful French, English, and Dutch settlements springing up in the Lesser Antilles. Remembering the Pope-given rights, thousands of Spanish troops stormed St. Martin in 1638, took control of the island and built the old Spanish fort at Point Blanc. 6 years later, Peter Stuyvesant directed his Dutch troops in an unsuccessful effort to retake the island. Attack. Governor Peter Stuyvesant of Curaçao sent 5 large Dutch ships, a pink, and 2 tenders on a campaign to reconquer the former weak base of Saint Martin. After pausing at St. Kitts to recruit English and French volunteers, he arrived off the eastern shores of St. Martin at dawn on the 20th of March, accompanied by a half-dozen merchantmen that continued further north. Stuyvesant's squadron veered inshore and besieged the lone Spanish fortification, then anchored nearby and disembarked several hundred troops. The Dutch spent the next 2 days installing a 3-gun battery atop some heights. On the 22nd of March they called on Spanish Governor Diego Fajardo to lay down his arms. Despite low morale, poor equipment, and insufficient rations, the 120-man Spanish garrison refused to surrender, and Stuyvesant initiated a long-range bombardment next dawn. A chance Spanish counter-shot carried off the Dutch commander's right leg while he was standing beside his battery, requiring Stuyvesant to be carried back aboard ship for amputation below the knee. The injury left the small army leaderless, undermining its resolve. On the night of 31 March 1 April an assault column under cover of darkness advanced toward the Spanish positions, almost escaping the sentinels' detection because all were musketeers. Once the Dutch intruders were discovered, however, a firefight erupted until dawn. At least 5 Dutch attackers were killed, as opposed to a single Spaniard. A second, even more half-hearted attempt was made at 9 p.m. on the 3rd of April, which was easily repelled. No further assaults were made. On the night of 15-16 April, a Puerto Rican coaster under Sargento Mayor Baltazar de Alfaro landed refreshments for Guajardo's garrison, snapping the besiegers' will. The Dutch retired to the ships, a rearguard blew up the siege guns and fires the encampments by the 17th of April, and the flotilla departed towards St. Eustatius and then Curaçao. Stuyvesant eventually returned toward Holland in August to convalesce from his wound. Aftermath. The year the Spanish left, the French and Dutch returned and divided the island 16 square miles to the Dutch and 21 square miles to the French. For the next 2 centuries there were occasional clashes between the two nations for complete control of the island, but in 1869 a final agreement was reached honoring the original boundaries set in 1648. The two-nation island has existed peacefully ever since.